everyone, and welcome to Survive This Crit, where we take a breakdown of some of Hollywood's most famous monster movies, and we play RPGs with them. I'm your final girl, Kylie, and this is my final guy,
Nick. Quick question, Kylie, just for all our listeners out there. What does final guy and final girl actually mean?
I mean, it is that classic horror trope of being the last person left alive. And usually it's the person that finally defeats the killer too, whether it's by actually defeating them or running away successfully. So that is why we love spending that last episode per series on seeing if we can be the final girl or guy in the series.
So we're the survivors. Got it.
We're trying to be. We're striving. All right. What have you been up to this week?
Just trying to be the final guy surviving. No. What have I been up to? Mostly just doing projects around the house with my parents. They came into town. They helped us sand down our dining room table and chairs that we've been working on for the past year. Little projects like that around the house.
Nice. I'm sure that family time is really fun too.
Oh yeah, it's like the most quality time I get to spend with my dad nowadays.
Oh.
So, and then of course I get to have like some great one-on-one time with my mom, just see how her life's going and everything.
Yeah. Well, and you came to visit us a couple weeks ago. Can you give like your favorite highlight of coming to visit?
Leaving. No.
Wow. Okay. All right.
No. So basically I had two favorite parts really. In terms of actually going out and seeing DC, I loved going ice skating. Watching Josh trip and fall was very funny.
You made him do that though, because you were trying to attack him.
We're playing tag, Kylie, on the ice. It was his own fault, but I do apologize because I will admit I had a part to play in that. Second was obviously staying up late Saturday night and making burgers for everybody.
Those truly were the best burgers I think we've ever had. And we didn't even have buns on them, but there was something about the spices that you made. That was my favorite part of you guys being out here. All right. You ready to dive into Friday the 13th?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So this is just an introduction to Friday the 13th. Do you want to read a summary of the film?
Yes. Here is the summary for Friday the 13th, as according to IMDb. In 1957, a young boy named Jason drowns in a lake near Camp Crystal Lake. The next year, 2 counselors are murdered. In 1980, a descendant of the original owners reopens Camp Crystal Lake with some counselors' help. The counselors get killed one by one by a mysterious person. Could it be Jason? Out for revenge? Who knows?
So, as an introduction to the film was actually made with less money than Nightmare on Elm Street. It had only a $550,000 budget, but it grossed $5 million in the first weekend. And the total gross of the film was 59.8, which is 217 million in today's money, plus some change. And they managed to film it in less than a month, which is another one of those, like, they are just pumping this film out as fast as they possibly can. It was directed and produced by Sean Cunningham, written by Victor Miller, and it became the highest grossing horror series ever. And it was released May 9th, 1980. So it was not released on Friday the 13th, unfortunately. They missed a great opportunity marketing-wise there.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Do you have a guess on what the Rotten Tomatoes critic score versus the audience score was?
Okay. I'm just going to go with tuition here because I got nothing to go on besides that. I'm going to say 54%.
For critic or audience?
Oh, my bad. I'm going to say for critic.
All right. You know what? That was way closer than last time. Critic was 63%.
Dang. So close.
So close. What about the audience?
For the audience, Well, I know we're all a bunch of idiots compared to those critics, so um, I'm gonna say 78%.
Wow. Okay. You were a little bit off, but that's all right. The audience score was 60%. The film itself is still in the highest grossing horror films of all time. So, can you guess what the top 5 are for the highest grossing films for horror specifically?
Oh, I was gonna say this is gonna be easy. Okay. Horror films, highest grossing. I'm gonna say Nightmare on Elm Street.
No, that's
What?
not one of them. I'm sorry, no, this is as a source note, this is these statistics right here. Let me try that again. These statistics that I'm using right here are from Movies That Made Us, season 3, episode 2. So
Okay, so when was this released? What year was this made?
like 2 years ago.
2 years ago? Okay. Then I'm gonna say in there is probably either Us or Get Out. No?
Okay, I'll give you a
Oh,
hint. The number 1 is your favorite horror movie.
I just said Nightmare on Elm Street.
Okay, your other favorite horror movie, the one I refuse to watch.
Oh, Paranormal Activity?
That's ranked number 1. It's the highest grossing film of all time.
Yeah.
Statistic was made. All right,
I knew it. People, it is a good movie. Vindication.
What number 2 is?
Okay.
It's not Us or Get Out. I'll give you a hint. It's
Okay.
film documentary style with a very, very low budget.
That almost makes me think of What We Do in the Shadows.
Okay, maybe
That's more of a
documentary,
comedy.
or like nature documentary style.
Oh, Blair Witch Project?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
All right, so
I
that's
can believe
number 2.
that. Everyone's always talking about that one. Haven't seen it yet.
Number 3.
This is so hard.
It's a classic, like Hollywood movie monster, not from like the 50s, but from like the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s era, from those 40 years. It's actually what this film was inspired by.
Is it a zombie movie?
No, it's not.
Oh my
It's
god.
a serial killer movie.
I'm really bad at this.
You're good. I can finish it up for you so you don't have to suffer any longer. But now I know how trivia is going to go. So
Yeah.
the film was placed in the top 5 grossing horror films of all time. Number 1, Paranormal Activity. Number 2, Blair Witch Project. Number 3, Halloween. Number 4, Friday the 13th. And number 5, Saw.
Okay, I could believe those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So, do you want to do some monster movie trivia?
Not after what I just experienced there. But I don't think I have much of a choice. Yeah, I'm definitely warmed up. Let's go.
Right.
Let's do this.
Let's do it. Who was the first victim in the film that we see die?
That would be Annie.
You've been slashed.
Oh my, no, it was the counselors. It was the
Yeah.
counselors. Dang it. Okay.
It was Barry and Claudette, the couple making out in the flashback.
Sorry, I tried to block that scene from my mind.
All right. Well, do you want to make a noise? You've been slashed. All right. Question 2. You may not make it to the end. Let's see.
I might die immediately.
We'll see. It could be a throwback to Nightmare on Elm Street. What is the name of the man who told Annie that she would die if she went to Camp Crystal Blood? Camp Blood, as he called it. The same man who reappears in the cabin.
Yes. That was Ralph.
Yes. All right. So
You're doomed.
You're doomed. Who originally didn't want to be in the film because of the graphic violence?
I have no clue. So I'm just gonna throw out a guess here.
Okay.
Is it Kevin Bacon?
No, you've been slashed. It was Adrienne King who played Alice Hardy, the final girl.
Oh, okay.
All right. So You're trucking along. You've got one life left, but I'll still read off the rest of them, even if you die, because they're pretty good.
Okay.
Who pretends to drown in the lake at the camp so he can get made out with?
Ned.
Nice. All right. What state was Friday the 13th filmed?
Is it Virginia?
No, it's New Jersey.
What? I thought you said we're I require a second chance. You led me on. I qualified my answer with where it was filmed, not where the movie takes place.
Well, does it take place in New Jersey as well?
Every time I looked up where Camp Crystal Lake was, it said New Jersey.
Good try. I will give you one redeeming chance, even though the rules don't technically allow it.
Okay.
What board game is played in this movie?
Monopoly, but more specifically, it was Strip Monopoly.
All right. What is Mrs. Voorhees' first name?
Pamela.
Nice. All right. And these next two are gonna really hurt. These next three.
Okay, here we go. Wait, I'm getting ready.
What was Friday the 13th inspired by? What film? Hint, I literally said the film.
Oh, Halloween.
Okay. All right. And then let's see. There are a couple more questions here.
Wait, quick question. What year did Halloween come out? I thought they came out like at the same year or something.
I think it came out 2 years before.
Oh, okay.
All right. So the other questions here. There's a scene with Alice in the cabin with the snake. Do you have any idea who pitched the scene of the snake being there?
Was it a cast member?
No.
Then I'm dead.
You have been dead.
Can I say Sean? Wait. Can I say Sean Cunningham?
No, it's also not Sean.
Then I'm dead.
Nick, you did not survive monster movie trivia. So for those of you who want the answer to that, it was Tom, the special effects artist and makeup artist. It was based on his own experience camping. And it was a scene that wasn't even written into the script. That was something that they came up with while they were there. And then the final question, I believe, was, what was the inspiration for the iconic sound that defines Friday the 13th? You know that sound that's so eerie? You're
wait,
dead.
Wait.
You can...
I want to guess here because
okay.
I have a working theory. Whoever made up the iconic sound, were they in birthing classes, you know?
No.
That's what I kept thinking about the whole time.
Oh, that would have been good though. So as a fun fact, I know I'll dive into this more later, but it was literally based on a line that Betsy Palmer, who played Mrs. Voorhees, said. There was a close-up of her mouth and it was saying, "Kill her, mommy." And the sound engineer, sound composer rather, he was like, "That's an interesting sound. What would it sound like if I went?" And he had a sound system that allowed it to echo, which is why it kind of sounds a little bit more like, but it's actually in ma. Fun fact. That should blow your mind right there. I thought that fact was cool.
I'm sorry. I would constantly laugh when I heard that.
I loved it. All right. Well, I guess speaking of which, should we talk about our opinions of the movie? Because it seems like they're going to be very different.
Oh yeah, I'm so ready for this. Okay, I've been preparing. So, Kylie, you wanna start us off? What was your opinion of the movie?
Okay, so my opinions on the movie. The thing that I honestly noticed the most was the sound composition. They did a great job of layering like the sound with like the woods and the sound of people talking, because it's not a whole lot of music, but when it's there, you notice it. And I think they did a great job of really combining those elements together in a way that told a story that was along for the ride, rather than, because the music is almost a character in itself, because we don't see Mrs. Voorhees till the very end. So as one of the sources that I looked into was describing, like, the music was really there to show when the killer was there, hence the ma 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 sounds. So the sound composition honestly was my favorite thing of this whole movie. And I truly like don't it's so tropey. And in the deep dive, I'll explain why, but it's a very tropey movie. Like, there's not a whole lot of depth, in my opinion. But it's fun to watch, especially on Friday the 13th. It's fun to watch the kills, but that's really the only reason I feel like I'm watching it.
So, as for my opinion, I hated this movie.
Oh, we got a hate out of you. Okay.
I did not like it. There were several characters who served no purpose for moving the plot forward. I will forgive the fact that it's, from the 1980s, and so, movie quality and whatnot. You know, I'll forgive that.
Okay.
But we spend so much time with these characters that don't drive any of the story forward, and their deaths mean nothing because it never serves to add suspense to our final girl.
Yeah.
And worst of all, and I will admit, okay, I had never seen the movie, so I had maybe I had different expectations, but the fact that we never see Jason until that one little scene at the end, I guess you could claim that's Jason jumping out of the water. But besides that, the fact that it was Pamela Voorhees the entire time, I was disappointed.
That's fair. I think your opinion aligns with a lot of the critic opinions throughout, because when the film came out, critics hated it. They were like, there's no real story. People are just dying for no particular reason. And I think it's not my favorite, but I can see the merit in a couple of different spots. Which is why I think it was a fun challenge for us to review and talk about this one. And I have more respect for it now that I've done a deep dive. But I agree with you in parts. Like, you don't really have an emotional connection to any of the characters.
No, they spend no time. Like, I mean, like, I feel like I could have really have loved, or rather, I could have mourned Ned's death if we had actually gotten to see him be more than just, the fool. There was this little scene. They had it. It was like Jack and Marcy were being all cutesy out by the lake, and then you pan out and you see there's Ned just off by himself. He looks kind of bummed a little bit to be off by himself. But the problem is that, like, right then and there is when he gets killed. Yeah, it's like, well, I like to know a little bit more about Ned before, that poor guy gets killed.
Well, I would even agree, like, even rooting for our final girl, we don't know her. We just know that she is good at drawing, and she seems to have a weird, intimate connection with the camp counselor. But outside of that, even our final girl, we don't have an emotional connection with her. Honestly, the person I had the most emotional connection with was Annie, and she was killed within the first 10 minutes of the movie.
Oh my, Annie was the campiest character. I hated her.
She was so cute.
Hi there, little girl. I mean, boy. Do you know where Camp Crystal Lake is? You speak English?
I loved her because she was so innocent. And that's why they cast her. They're like, she looks like she'd be really fun to kill.
Yeah, but she should have been there in the camp.
Yeah.
She died before she gets to the camp. Means that she served no purpose whatsoever.
Yeah. I could see that. And honestly, it was the music was the most interesting part for me. I mean, the camera playing the killer was cool too. And I think the special effects notes that I have on it, I'll talk about that. But it talks, like, it covers our two least favorite tropes. We can't see the killer, And the mother freaking jump scare at the end, the first time I saw it, I just about jumped out of my seat because I thought it was the end and it wasn't. So
See, I saw that and I was like, okay, there we go. This is what the movie needed from probably maybe scene 3 or whatever or something like that.
that's fair. I
Oh,
mean,
someone get jump attacked by Jason himself.
I get the validity of it. I just don't like it
Mm-hmm.
personally. But I realized right before we deep dive, like, I realized that this story really is a recipe. It's the documentary talks about this. Like, they literally took pieces that made Halloween great and just copy and pasted those pieces into a different setting. So if you want to hear more, I can deep dive.
You know, I would love to hear some more. Actually, I want to more specifically. Can you tell me? You have anything else about like the music, anything like that that you really liked? Because I want to know more about that. I want to know more about something that was actually good about this movie.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't have a whole lot on Harry Manfredini. I believe was his name. Most of these people were not a fan of horror when they signed up, or nor did they like the script. But his biggest challenge was really, how do I tell the audience that this is a killer and not a cameraman? And that's where the came in. And I think that was a genius part, because he came up with in his head after hearing her say killer mommy, he was like, oh, she hears voices, I can work with that. So the sound composition honestly is like my favorite part of this whole film, because it's such a simple concept, but it takes a really unique mind to come up with something like that. So there's some other stuff though that was interesting. The special effects team was definitely noteworthy. Tom Savini and Taso Stebakis, I believe, they're the special effects team. They work together, they're like besties, and they did all the killing themselves. So Taso, I believe, played the killer for all the kills, except for when Mrs. Voorhees dies, in which he's playing Mrs. Voorhees, which sounds crazy, but let me break it down. So a lot of the death was like pretty classic horror movie stuff where they'd use a prosthetic and then copper wiring to pump blood. But there are some really notable ones too. So on the killing floor, breaking down each death scene that I thought was worthy to talk about was Kevin Bacon's death. So he, as you saw, got stabbed through the throat with an arrow.
Oh, that was so cool. Actually, I did enjoy that. That was like, ooh.
Like,
Actually, you know what? No, really quick. I'm sorry. This is a little tangent, but I noted it while we were watching the movie, or while I was watching the movie. So Mrs. Voorhees kills him from underneath the bed after he's just finished doing the dirty with Marcy.
Yeah.
So do you think she was under the bed the whole time, just listening to those two?
Oh, 100%. She's a serial killer. She's gonna do what she has to do to get the job done. But for Kevin Bacon, when he died, so how they did that, because it looks really real. They had a fake body from like his head down. So they pierced an arrow through the body, and they could only do it once to make it work. And on the other side was a fire extinguisher hooked up to the base of the neck that was filled with blood that Taso was hand pumping, and when it wouldn't work, Taso had to blow into the pipe to make it work. And that's why it looks so great and like a real artery splattering. But as a result, Taso got blood all in his mouth, which blood back then wasn't made with stuff that was edible. It was made with Taso syrup, food coloring, and Kodak photo fluid. So he definitely messed up his mouth a bit for the work, which sounds so dirty. Just, I will cut that. Um, but some of the other deaths that were really notable, Marcy, Jeannie Taylor, she had a prosthetic and an axe literally glued to her face for the shot, like glued on, not just stuck
Mhm.
on. And the other two that I thought was really notable was Harry Crosby, who played Bill, the arrow shot in the eye death.
Oh,
First
that
of
was the
all,
saddest death for me. I was like, okay, I was a little emotionally invested with Bill.
okay, see, you found somebody to be emotionally invested in.
Mhm.
Adrian, who played Alice, her reaction was real. She had no idea he was going to be hung up like that. So she was
Oh,
very
perfect.
genuinely horrified.
That's how you do
But
it.
Taso kept pumping blood so that it would continually spill out of his eye socket where the prosthetic was. But because he was continually pumping blood, it got into Harry's eye and he actually lost vision in that eye for 6 months.
Ooh.
Yeah. So they had it quickly wrapped, take him to the emergency room. No one could quite figure out like what was going on. He lost his vision for 6 months and then it came back, which is
Okay.
crazy.
Okay.
Dying for your art.
Exactly. This is an example of really sacrificing yourself to make sure everything looks great. I like it. Okay.
The final kill that was noteworthy, I feel like, was the decapitation. Decapitation. So there was a plaster head and shoulders mounted onto Tazo, the special effects assistant, and it was attached with toothpicks. And how you know it's Tazo actually is when the head swings off with a machete, you see knuckles go up, and those are his hairy knuckles. And he actually makes a comment about it in the documentary. He's like, those are my hairy knuckles. There was nothing we could do with them. But Tom, the special effects designer, was the one who used the machete to cut off his head to make sure they did it safely because he knew exactly where to swing.
Okay.
So
So here's my question though, because that's one thing I started to. Here's the truth. I had to watch that movie twice, more like one and a half
interesting.
times,
Okay.
because the first time I definitely knew like I did not like this movie. But you were talking about how sorry, can you say his name again? The special
Tazo
effects
and
guy?
Tom.
Yeah. Uh you're mentioning how they would be behind the camera as the killer, right?
So Tazo would do the kills. Like whether it was like the slashing the throat, that was for accuracy purposes.
Okay.
They would be the ones like right next to the camera, not being the cameraman, but they'd be
Okay. Because
there.
I just had the sneaking suspicion the whole time that like now this time knowing that Pamela is the killer,
Mhm.
that that wasn't Pamela there the whole time. I was like, okay. I was looking at the bodies, like, is that a little different than what Pam looks like? I was looking at the shoes, everything, just trying to really nitpick because I had that inkling, that suspicion of like they didn't even bother putting in the effort to make sure that it seemed like Pam was the killer.
Yeah, I mean, I think they wanted to throw off the audience, but I personally love that Tom and Tazo were so deeply involved in the movie. Like, additionally, the big fight scene at the end between Alice and Mrs. Voorhees, they choreographed that because they're members of the British fight director fight British fight director members. So they actually choreographed that fight because initially, as the girls were going at it, Sean Cunningham was like, "This is not good. I need to do something about this." And fight choreography is a difficult skill to have, especially fight choreography that looks real. Like they were using real weapons and real props. Like the oar that breaks in half and stuff. That was all real. And they had a great fight choreographer to make it happen. So, my opinion, Tom and Tazo are the ones that like saved this movie. It would have been so much worse without all the blood, without that fight choreo at the end. It's what makes it, I think, puts it on the map. Because imagine it without the blood. Imagine it
Oh
without
yeah.
the epic fight scene.
No, I agree. Like that was honestly probably one of the better parts is like seeing the kills happen. So I'll give you that one. I'll give you. So okay. Uh, I'll keep this really quick, but I think for my portion of deep dive here, I'm going to talk about how I would fix this movie.
Oh, okay. And I have more deep dive stuff too, but go ahead. I want to hear this. How would you fix it?
Okay. Hear me out. What we do, first off, get rid of Annie. There was too many cast members. Okay.
Mhm.
If you want to insist on having someone like Annie in there, she's got to be at the camp.
Okay.
Okay. Um, we have besides the Annie parts, the rest of the beginning of the film, okay, it sets the scene. We get the counselors at the camp having fun, having a blast,
Mhm.
and that was okay. It it helped us a little bit with getting to know our characters, but I think they could have done a little bit more, have a few more scenes where like, they're all just chilling out by the lake, and maybe rather than ask questions like, oh, what flavor of ice cream were you? Um, you know, just something that's a bit more revealing about the characters, something that gives us at least one little hint of backstory on
Okay.
them.
Interesting.
Um, so maybe a couple little moments like that mixed in there. Um, you can even make the argument of thinning down the number of counselors, say to like four.
Mhm.
Um, but each one of the characters kind of thins out the trope. So if we break it down like that, Jack and Marcy are important because they're your love interest people. They're the sex symbols of the movie.
Yeah.
So they're the ones that have to be killed for for doing the horrible misdeed of having sex.
And there we lost our PG rating.
You keep Ned in there because you always got to have your jokester.
Right.
We get maybe some of his backstory. We find out that he's a jokester because he's trying to get attention because he doesn't get enough attention at home or something like that.
Okay.
We keep Bill because honestly, he was the first one that Alice, our final girl, actually gets to see dead, and he creates that suspense. So we can
Okay.
keep him, and maybe what was her name? Betsy, one who proposed to play strip
Oh, Brenda.
Monopoly.
Brenda.
Brenda. We keep Brenda, or whether or not we keep Brenda, that's up in the air.
Okay. So
So
basically, you want to get rid of Annie, Brenda, and then keep Alice, Marcy, Bill, Jack. Do you want to keep, and Ned, and then do you want to keep Steve Christie, the owner of the camp?
yes, you keep Steve because he's their boss and he's got to in the uh, go off to take care of business.
Okay.
It just
So
helps
essentially,
kind
you
of.
want to get rid of two characters and
Yeah.
not like juice up their stories a little bit.
Yeah, so let's get rid of those two characters. Um, you can make the case for Brenda if you want. Um, but then what happens is the storm comes in after they've had their fun,
Mhm.
and they get Jack and Marcy get separated, and then we just have Bill, Alice, and Ned. Now Jack and Marcy, they go off and do their horrible misdeed, and the sinners.
Oh my gosh. Okay, keep going.
And just as before in the movie, they get horribly murdered. You can it can happen in the cabin together, or it can happen as it were, where it's just Marcy in the bathroom and Jack in the cabin,
Mhm.
whichever. But at some point, the other three in the counselor's lounge, where they were in the original movie, they have to acknowledge the fact that, hey, the storm's getting pretty bad. Where are Jack and Marcy? And maybe instead of just, oh, let's let them be. Instead, be like, you know, let's go make sure they're okay. You
Mm.
know, actually be some decent friends. And so they go out, they stay together, and they find either Jack or Marcy, whichever. And that's when they realize, oh shoot, there's a killer somewhere. What's going on? Now we have suspense. Now they're trying to figure out who's the killer. They're a little suspicious of each other, but at the same time, they're like, no, we've been together the whole time, so it couldn't be us. But they don't know how to explain it, what's happening. And then the movie kind of becomes this whole uh, what is it, proponent for never break the buddy system, never go out into the woods by yourself. And so it's this idea of like, okay, well, they regroup in the counselor's lounge, trying to figure out what's going on. And then, was it Bill and Ned have to come up with excuses for why they have to go off alone. Something urgent where they try and leave, but then the others say, no, 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 don't go. But then they say, no, I have to for reasons A, B, or C. And eventually they find him dead again. And then, until finally there's just Alice left. And then the movie just continues to play on the exact way it did. And I think that's how you fix the movie.
So essentially, you want to make it about an hour longer by adding more tension in suspense and taking out two characters.
I think we
that's
could
a quick-
accomplish. I think we could accomplish this in an extra 30 minutes. I don't think it has to be an hour long. Plus, think of all the time we spend with Annie. Cut that out.
Don't dig on my girl Annie. I like her the best.
Okay,
Anyways,
then Annie stays in the camp and get rid of.
Let's deep dive into the person who actually made the movie. Although your version sounds great, and maybe you could do a fan film, but let's talk about Sean Cunningham.
Let's do it.
His previous career, he was a stage manager on Broadway, which that is hard work. That's tracking sound cues, light cues, actor cues. It's tracking everything all at once to make sure every show runs smoothly. And his first film was actually a documentary, and his only documentary as far as I'm aware. So he didn't go to film school like a lot of other people did. He just learned by doing it. So he got involved and he did his first project, and it was surprisingly successful. It's called The Art of Marriage. So if anybody is struggling, they may want to check it out. I'm not sure how great the information is. I've never watched it, but critics and audiences seem to really like it. And then he started working very closely with his good friend, Wes Craven, who we know from Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream, of course.
Ooh.
They worked on a film called Together, which was it was bordering adult/romance film, where it could still be shown in theaters because it wasn't that level of adult, but it was definitely more intimate than what was coming out at the time. And they made almost $1 million off of it in the 70s. And they were like, this is cool. We should do more of those. So then they diverted a little bit, did a couple of horror films together, which weren't exceptionally notable. And then Sean Cunningham did a big pivot and started doing children's movies, like about sports, and none of those were hits. So his directing style, though, is he thinks very loosely and does a lot in the moment. Like Annie's scenes of her walking, of her falling, like being chased by the killer, a lot of that was improv on the day, where Sean would be yelling at her like, okay, can you fall here? Cool. Go around this tree and then fall again. But after Halloween came out, he was like, you know what? This did great. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to make the scariest film ever. So that's what he attempted to do. And a notable quote that I feel like sums up his ambitions as a director and a producer was, the most important thing you can do in a film career is make money. So that way you can make more films and take other chances, and no one will shame them.
That's a smart way to live.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because he seems to have a very different perspective than the perspective of, oh, I have to make my art. I have to tell my stories. It's like, I'm going to make some great baller money and then make whatever I want. So, but his way of getting this film off the ground is actually really creative and kind of ingenious. So he came up with the title of the film before anything else. And he was like, Friday the 13th, I'd watch a movie about that. I bet other people would too. And there was no concept, no script. And he bought a Variety ad to try to get investors and people interested. And all it said was Friday the 13th, scariest movie ever made. And people from other countries were interested. They're like, this sounds cool. And his former investor, who invested in a lot of his other films, reached out and was like, I'd invest in this. Like, let's make this movie.
Well, yeah,
So,
Friday the 13th sounds like an awesome name. I'll give him that. Like, you take the unluckiest day of the year, you add a little like a little bit of horror to it. It's great.
yeah. And eventually he got Phil, this guy, to invest in the whole film. So that was really cool that he had only one investor, but he wanted a slightly different tactic. He was like, okay, what can I do to make it a little different than Halloween? Oh yeah, I'm just gonna add a lot of blood. So most of the people, though, were not a fan of the script. And I think you and I both can agree, like, it's not anything special. And that's because it literally was a recipe. Victor Miller, who wrote the script, he had written the failed sports movies and kids movies that Sean Cunningham had done before. He wrote this based off the recipe for Halloween, which was, there's prior evil involved. The teens are alone. Nobody's going to help them. And then you're going to kill them one by one, especially those who are having sex, especially for those who are being intimate.
The sinners.
Oh my gosh, that was scary. The script, though, really became about waiting for the kills. It really is a copy-paste recipe. They're like, all right, we're going to kill these people off one by one. People are going to want to watch the kills. And the script actually originally ended with just her floating in the lake, Alice. Just like, it's done. The final girl made it. But the investor of the film was like, hey, y'all, we need like a Carrie ending. We need to like juice this up. And Tom, the special effects guy, was like, hey, what if Jason comes back? I don't know, crazy idea. So Victor wrote that into the film. So in the end, while it's not the best script in the world, we really have Tom, the special effects guy, to thank for that. And Victor Miller claims no credit for being involved with Jason being the killer. In fact, according to Wikipedia, he disapproves of it.
You know what? I firmly, the whole reason I could forgive the movie was because at the end, Jason being there. And then I'm just thinking to myself, okay, so maybe in a convoluted way, Jason really is the murderer because he somehow psychically made his mom crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, mommy, please kill for me, mommy. Kill, please.
Killer, mommy. Killer. Well, a couple quick things about the actors. There's not a whole lot of like crazy stuff. There's a couple good things, but it's a lot of really green actors, similar to Nightmare on Elm Street. Like Adrienne King, who played Alice, this was her big break into film. Jeannie Taylor, who also was fairly new in film, in the documentary, she talks about being the most nervous for the sex scene. So Kevin Bacon actually offered to share a joint with her before they did that scene so she could relax.
The sinners.
They did that scene faked, and I love that. But there was a couple people who were not Nepto babies, but people who got cast because they knew people or were involved in the film previously. Like Harry Crosby is Bill Crosby's son, so you got to get like a big name involved. Kevin Bacon had already done 4 films at that point, so he already was a name. Peter Brower, who played the camp counselor, he was married to the director's assistant. And the director's assistant was like, hey, Sean, I'm gonna quit if you don't cast him. And that's how he got the job, which is a pretty solid wife move. And Betsy Palmer, she was seen as the squeaky clean type, like the comparable to Doris Day back in the day. But as a person in reality, she was quoted as someone who would swear like a sailor. And she would only smoke the pot that she grew in her personal warehouse.
Getting high on your own supply.
Yeah. So I thought that was noteworthy, honestly, because I was like, this is probably filmed in the 70s. Like, let's talk about this weed.
Well, they definitely had quite a bit of it. Well, not they had a little bit of it throughout the film. It was so
Yeah.
funny. Like the second I heard the words leave Kevin Bacon's mouth, when the cop pulls up, he goes, "It's me smoking? No, causes cancer." I was like, lies.
Lies.
I can see it in your teenage face.
All
I
right.
was channeling the cop in that moment.
Oh, okay, so you were the cop the whole time.
Oh yeah.
Got it. That makes sense. So as for how people responded to the film when it came out, similar to Nightmare on Elm Street, during the Paramount screening, the last reel didn't even make it to the screening. Like, what is with people and these last reels not being made to the screening? This is crazy.
Hmm. Maybe we need to make that into like a segment name or something like that. The last reel.
The last reel. But Paramount was willing to watch it again. So with the last reel for the ending, they watched it twice because they liked it enough. And then Paramount released it nationally in thousands of theaters, which is way better than Sean Cunningham expected. And then right away after it came out, Paramount's like, gotta do a sequel. Bring back Jason. And Sean was like, I hate that idea. I do not want to do that. But everyone wanted to work with him after on a horror film. And Sean himself said, he's like, I have had nothing to do with the hockey mask. The hockey mask didn't even come till part 3. But critics hated this movie very genuinely.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they focused on the sex and the violence and the gore, and they absolutely hated it. To the point that one critic gave out Betsy Palmer, who played Mrs. Voorhees, her home address out. So that way fans could write to her to be like, I hated this film and I hated you in it.
Well, that's just rude.
Right? But here's the thing. Critics hated the film, but audiences absolutely loved it. Outside of the feminist crowd of the 80s, like the feminists hated it, which is fair. Like there's the strong female's not really now strong of a female. Let's just be real. But kids loved it.
The main villain is a female, so
true. I do appreciate that. But the kids loved it. They loved running out of the theater during it and like screaming, and like it was a huge cult classic in audiences. So, and a ton of knockoffs were created based on that recipe. Like the bloody camp splatter decade is like what came to follow, because everyone's like, this works. I'm gonna copy and paste that recipe and make camp horror movies.
I should say, for all my hate of the movie, I do recognize that this had what, like 10 sequels? Maybe more? I don't know, but like I can acknowledge the fact that people really got behind it. There's probably something really good about this movie. It's just this first one. It's the only one I've seen. And there were just the things I didn't like. But I will not ignore the fact that it has a cult following that has built it up, and I'm sure has helped improve the story throughout the years.
If you want a deep dive in your own time using the sources that I used for this film, check out Netflix's The Movies That Made Us, Season 3, Episode 2, and The Making of Friday the 13th, Return to Crystal Lake, as featured on the Warner's Bros. DVD. So briefly, for the Letterboxd reviews, out of 5, how good do you think this movie holds up with today's audiences?
Let's see. I'm gonna say out of 5, it's a solid 3.5.
Ooh, you're much better at the Letterboxd reviews than the tomato meter. Let me just say that. It was
there's only 5 numbers, so
Yeah, that's true. Less likelihood to fail. It was a 3.1. And 2 reviewers I thought were worth talking about was saying, Matt said, there aren't enough horror movies with killers wearing cable knit sweaters. I respect that.
Yeah, I can see that. That'd be great.
Sarah said, I genuinely cannot get over the fact that there is no Jason in a hockey mask in this movie.
Who said that?
A girl named Sarah.
Sarah, you're very smart. You're one of the smart people in this world.
All right. calm down there. If you want to follow me on Letterboxd, I'll include it in the description. It's at Kylie Rain, so make sure to check it out. I'll be including every movie that we watch there with my own reviews. So let's do final thoughts for this episode then. Okay, you want to
Okay.
go first?
Yeah. All right. So my final thoughts on this movie are that overall wasn't a good movie. There were a couple things that could be redeeming about it and that I could see helped really build the legs for what is a strong franchise in the future,
Mm-hmm.
but not a great start. That's just how I feel about it. I'm not bashing anyone who does like the movie, and I'm not claiming to be any film expert or, you know, artist in any way. It's just my opinion. That's it.
All right. My opinion. So, from the producer perspective, I can see they made a great move market wise. They saw the market was going toward these splatter, like horror movies where a killer is lurking around, knocks teenagers off by one by one. So, from that perspective of making a movie that's going to make a lot of money, I totally respect it because they have such a cult following, even now, years and years later. But I will say in general, the thing I love most about movies is a strong story, and it does not have that. It doesn't have a strong story, and I feel like Taso and Tom, the special effects team, really saved the movie in general because they made the kills worth watching.
Whenever we decide to make T-shirts, we should have something that honors Tazo and Tom.
Taso, we're the biggest fans of Taso and Tom. I would love that.
I'll jump on board that bandwagon right there. All right, that's all the time we have for today, but thank you everyone for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode on Friday the 13th. Make sure to give us a like or a rating. We love hearing your feedback, and we will see you next time on Survive This Crit.
Bye. Okay.
Bye.